The last time I stood on a TED main stage was 20-something February 2013, and it was in Long Beach, California. And TED gave me their prize at that point in time, $1 million. I thought they would put it in my bank account, but they didn't actually. They gave it to the university. But anyhow, here I am again on a TED main stage. I spent the $1 million. Okay? I'll tell you what happened next. I thought I'd give you a report on what I did with the money and where we are at this point in time. It's not all gone, there's just a little bit left. When TED gave me the prize, they also gave another prize, a smaller one, to Sundance Institute to make a documentary on the whole project. The documentary will be called The School in the Cloud. At the moment, the documentary is not finished, but I got hold of a trailer, and I thought you might enjoy watching that.
What is the future of learning? Could it be that we are heading towards, or maybe in, a future when knowing is obsolete? Could it be that we don't need to go to school at all? Could it be that at the point in time when you need to know something, you can find out in 2 minutes? My wish is to build a facility where children go on these intellectual adventures, driven by the big questions which their mediators put in. It's a facility which is practically unmanned. It will be called the School in the Cloud.
মানুষ করার ইচ্ছা খুব, কিন্তু সেরকম ভাবে আমরা পারছি কই এখানে যে স্কুল।
Good teachers don't go to remote places. The remoter you get, the worse primary education becomes. I don't know how to build a school in the cloud because I've never built one. So I'm trying to figure out a design which, really speaking, belongs to children and is run by children. So that's what's going on. It's a great big experiment.
Schools as we know them now, they're outdated.
As soon as I started doing it and seeing the buzz and the enjoyment of the kids, it made me look at my lessons differently and the role of a teacher differently, less talking at the front and more handing it over to the children.
I really like it because it's independent and you get to work with your friends.
Korakati may or may not be different from the schools of England. That's what we are going to look for.
The idea is to have a complete glass front to a building here and a large screen for a full-size Skyped-in mediator.
ইন্টারনেট বসানো থাকবে, এই লন্ডন থেকে কম্পিউটারের মাধ্যমে এখানে পড়ানো হবে।
All I ever really wanted to know about computers was how to turn them off.
Hi! Hello, Raveen. Hello, Ajay. How nice to see you. Look what I made. Can you see what this is?
সব জায়গায় প্রায় ইংরেজির ছোটবেলা থেকে যদি শিখি তাহলে আমার বড় হলে তখন আরো ভালোভাবে শিখতে পারবো।
You help a child to the point where if he wants to know something, he knows where to look for it and how to look for it.
The more affluent children have people who will help them to learn anyway. But it's children in desolate areas who really desperately need to know how to learn. And I know that the internet does that. Learning itself is actually an emergent phenomenon, like a hive or like a thunderstorm.
It's not about making learning happen, it's about letting it happen.
I made a project. I made a project for TED. The way it works is that they tell you what will you do with the money if you get it. So I made out a project. The project was that I would build 7 laboratories, 7 learning laboratories. 5 of them would be in India, and 2 would be in England. What sort of labs? Well, for that, you need to know what happened before, which I won't go over, but what happened in the 15 years before the TED Prize was that I was able to figure out something which all of you know, and all of you can figure out for yourselves in about 2 minutes, which is that if you have a question, you no longer need to ask a human being for an answer. There's something out there which can tell you what the answer is. What is it out there? Well, the internet, of course, we call it the cloud. To me, it's the first non-human, conscious and intelligent entity that we have encountered. We always thought that aliens will land from other planets and they'll be green with long legs and round eyes. It turned out it was not going to be like that. The alien entity is made up of 4 billion people. But it is not a person. It's a thing. You can ask that thing anything, and it tells you what you want to know. Given that situation, what happens to children and what happens to education? Well, there are reports from all around the world that children are not asking questions to people. Or at least if they have to ask a question to a person, they do that after they have asked their phones. Children don't want to learn how to multiply, divide, add, and subtract, because they say they already know how to do that. It's done with phones. Children don't want to particularly to learn to read, because they say there are things that can read out things to them, even if they don't know how to read. At the moment, they don't like to write by hand, because they want to know why they should learn how to write by hand. Will they ever do it in the rest of their lives? So what happens in a world where reading, writing, and arithmetic are treated in such a cavalier manner? I wanted to experiment with that world. The idea was to create facilities for children which has the internet, and where children can go in and do what they like without any supervision or without any teachers. We could have presence there, but it would come out of the internet over Skype from somewhere, if the children wanted to. I work with children in the age group of about 8 to 12 or 13 years old, and they love speaking to adults over Skype, particularly adults who, like retired school teachers and things like that. And I asked them, so why do you like this so much? Do you like it? They said, yes, we love it. Why do you like it so much? They said, you know what? We can switch them off. What I did after February 2013 was to first look for places and then start building. The 7 labs are built to cover from the really remote area, such as areas without electricity, without healthcare, without schooling, nothing really, just the wild, through to middle-class England, and all the ones in between. So the 7 have all been built now. I finished opening the last one just this month. The very first one was open November 2013, the same year that I got the prize. You see over there a picture of that lab. It's in a town called Killingworth, England. It's actually situated inside a school. The school's called George Stephenson High School. It's very close to George Stephenson's home, the guy who built the first working steam engine. In Killingworth, this is a room. It just looks like a nice lounge with computers and an Xbox. And the teachers, when I built it, they said, Sugata, this is a bit too much. Do you have any idea of what they're going to do with that Xbox? They're going to do nothing else except play with the Xbox. So I said, well, that's our challenge, isn't it? If you've gone in there to teach geography and the students are playing with the Xbox, it means geography is more boring than the Xbox. Then we should relook at geography, chuck it from the curriculum, or put it into the Xbox somehow. You can't tell the children, we'll take away your Xbox and we'll put you into school to do other things. That's not the right way to engage children's attention. So here it is, a picture of what happens in there. As you can see, there are 5 children in the corner researching something or the other, and there's one on the Xbox. If you give them something interesting enough to do, they don't actually play Xbox all the time. It was our misconception. Here's more of Killingworth. What they do in there is called a self-organized learning environment. It's very simple. Take 5 computers, take 20 children, put them in there, ask them a question. The question has to be an interesting one, what we call a big question. What's a big question? Well, it can be all kinds, but let me give you an example. A big question could be, can trees think? Okay? If you give that question to children, they'll first sort of mutter with these, trees, no, they can't. Yes, maybe they can. I don't know. And then you just leave them alone. And you say, well, I don't know the answer either, but why don't we look for it? And this will happen, what you see on the screen over there. And about 30 or 40 minutes later, they'll come back to you. And they'll come back not with childish observations. They'll come back with the nature of thought. They'll come back with the latest advances in biology, etc. That's called a self-organized learning environment. Here's one that we did in Kalkaji, New Delhi. It has on the wall a Skyped-in mediator, as you can see, and it's a girls' school. The girls couldn't speak any English to start with. We opened it in February 2014. I put in a team of observers to measure their beginning levels of English, which was close to 0. And then I said, we will measure every 2 months or so. After about 3 days, I was talking to this mediator that you see on the screen over Skype, and I was asking her, how's it going there? So she said, oh, very nice. Those girls are really nice. One of them said to me, when are you coming next? So I said, what? In what language did she say that? And the mediator said, in English. So when I sent my research team in after a month to measure the level, she reported that it's too late. It's done already. I've never seen anything happen so quickly, so I went to Delhi to ask the girls. I said, how did you do that so fast? Well, they gave me an answer which was quite astonishing. They said, you know that woman who comes on the TV screen, she doesn't understand anything other than English. It's as simple as that. This is a little town called Newton Aycliffe in England, County Durham. If you remember the map, it's in the northeast. This school is called Greenfields, and we have a school in the cloud there. What they've done is they've made one of their walls glass. On the other side is a green, typical English green countryside. Inside, they've put in AstroTurf, so that when you enter the room, suddenly you feel as though you're outside. because of the turf merging in. And they put park benches and gas lamps and things like that, and a few computers scattered in there. So the children come into that room, and when you leave them alone, by the way, when you do a self-organized learning environment, you don't stay there. You, the teacher, don't stay there. You go out. So you start the session, and you go out, and from the other side, which is also glass, you can observe them. Anyhow, once, very recently in Greenfields, a group of 8-year-olds were sent into the room by their teacher. And the teacher said, and we often do this in Souls, we say to the children, for the next 45 minutes, I can't talk to you, you can't talk to me. There's no communication. You're on your own. And there's the big question. So she did that. And these 8-year-olds sort of went and they're doing things. After a while, remember what she had said, you can't talk to me and I can't talk to you. After a little while, one of them came up to the glass window and he had a piece of paper in his hand and he held it up. On it was scrawled the words, help, we are stuck. She didn't say you can't communicate with me, she said you can't talk to me. Okay, I thought that was clever thinking. Here's another view of Greenfields. Another one. Chandrakona in Bengal. It's a pretty remote area. If you can think of the map of India, think of the eastern side, the side that point or is close to Burma and Thailand. This is somewhere there. In Chandrakona, we have this structure, and we built a school in the cloud. The parents came there. They're all farmers. And they said, what are we supposed to do here? They said, you're supposed to send your children here. So they said, what for? So I said, they'll learn things here. They pointed to the computers and said, from those TV screens. I said, they're not TVs, they're computers. They said, well, isn't that the same thing? I said, no, not quite. And they said, who will teach them? I said, they will teach themselves. How can they? I said, they'll use the internet. What's the internet? Where do you go from there? This is what it looks like inside. If you can see it, you'll see at the far end an Australian gentleman who talks to the children. I hate to think of what will happen to their accents, but otherwise they love him. In Chandrakona, 3 months later, there's a tall, slim, young girl there. So she was standing around. I had visited. She said, we really love this place. So I said, for what? So she said, you can find out all sorts of things here. I said, like what? What are you finding out now, today? She said, we were taught in school that plants are green because they have chlorophyll. And they have chlorophyll because they process light in order to make energy. I've come here to find out why chlorophyll has to be green and not blue or yellow or red. Do you know? I said, no. I have no idea why it has to be green. She said, okay, we'll figure it out. 3 months. That's a view of the inside again. And here is our most remote area. It's called Korakati. It's also eastern India. It's where the Ganges meets the sea. It has nothing there. There's no electricity, no healthcare, no schools. I won't say nothing. They have Bengal tigers and the hooded cobra. And they have lots of children. It took some building, but I built that one. It's solar powered. It has a tower which is 45 feet high. I couldn't get the internet. I had a receiver, kept raising it on bamboo poles. At 45 feet above ground, we got 8 megabit per second, 3G. So 3G met the Stone Age in there. In Chandrakona, the sessions are intermittent because of all sorts of problems. The cabling runs on the ground, the Ethernet cables which connect all the computers together. If you've seen those cables, they're kind of cream-colored. I have to remove them and lift them up somewhere because there is a very pale, thin snake which can change its color to the color of the Ethernet cable and sleeps there. Okay, a bit of a strange problem. You don't get these problems in schools usually. The internet comes and goes. The children walk for 3 miles, come to the school and find there's no internet and walk back 3 miles. Naturally, they are not very happy about it. But in the middle of all of this, what they do is that they find games, download them, and play them. Somehow, they're able to get up to that point. I asked them what a web page was quite recently, and they thought for a while, and they said, it's made by someone who is not here, someone very far away, who sends it somehow over those things which look like the cream-colored snakes. This is the latest of the areas. I don't have a picture of it. It's a hexagonal, it's our best structure. And in there, the studies are just beginning. Took a long time to build. It cost close to $1 million. But there are 1,000 children, 1,000 very interesting children added to the cloud. Thank you.
Khan Academy is most known for its collection of videos. So before I go any farther, let me show you a little bit of a montage.
So the hypotenuse is now going to be 5. This animal's fossils are only found in this area of South America, a nice clean band here, and this part of Africa. We could integrate over the surface, and the notation usually is a capital sigma. National Assembly, they create the Committee of Public Safety, which sounds like a very nice committee. Notice this is an aldehyde, and it's an alcohol. Start differentiating into effector and memory cells. A galaxy. Hey, there's another galaxy. Oh, look, there's another galaxy. And for dollars is their $30 million plus the $20 million from the American manufacturer. If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
We now have on the order of 2,200 videos covering everything from basic arithmetic all the way to vector calculus and some of the stuff that you saw up there. We have a million students a month using the site, watching on the order of 100 to 200,000 videos a day. But what we're going to talk about in this is how we're going to the next level. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about really just how I got started. And some of y'all might know, about 5 years ago, I was an analyst at a hedge fund, and I was in Boston, and I was tutoring my cousins in New Orleans remotely. And I started putting the first YouTube videos up really just as kind of a nice to have, just kind of a supplement for my cousins, something that might, give them a refresher or something. And as soon as I put those first YouTube videos up, something interesting happened. Actually, a bunch of interesting things happened. The first was the feedback from my cousins. They told me that they preferred me on YouTube than in person. And once you get over the backhanded nature of that, there was actually something very profound there. They were saying that they preferred the automated version of their cousin to their cousin. At first, it's very unintuitive, but when you actually think about it from their point of view, it makes a ton of sense. You have this situation where now they can pause and repeat their cousin. Now they can, without feeling like they're wasting my time. They could, if they have to review something that they should have learned a couple of weeks ago or maybe a couple of years ago, they don't have to be embarrassed and ask their cousin. They can just watch those videos. If they're bored, they can go ahead. They can watch it at their own time, at their own pace. And probably the least appreciated, aspect of this is the notion that the very first time that you're trying to get your brain around a new concept, the very last thing you need is another human being saying, "Do you understand this?" And that's what was happening with the interaction with my cousins before, and now they could just do it kind of in the intimacy of their own room. The other thing that happened is, I put them on YouTube just for the, I saw no reason to make it private, so I let other people watch it, and then people started stumbling on it, and I started getting some comments and some letters and all sorts of kind of feedback from random people around the world, and these are just a few. This is actually from one of the original calculus videos, and someone wrote just on YouTube, it was a YouTube comment. "First time I smiled doing a derivative." And let's pause here. This person did a derivative, and then they smiled. And then in response to that same comment, this is on the thread, you could go on YouTube and look at these comments, someone else wrote, "Same thing here. I actually got a natural high and a good mood for the entire day. Since I remember seeing all of this matrix text in class, and here I'm all like, I know Kung Fu." And we got a lot of feedback along those lines. It's clearly it was helping people. But then as the viewership kept growing, I started getting letters from people, and it was starting to become clear that it was actually more than just a nice to have. This is just an excerpt from one of those letters. "My 12-year-old son has autism and has had a terrible time with math. We have tried everything, viewed everything, bought everything. We stumbled on your video on decimals, and it got through. Then we went on to the dreaded fractions. Again, he got it. We could not believe it. He is so excited." And so you can imagine, here I was, an analyst at a hedge fund. It was very strange for me to do something of social value. So, I was excited, so I kept going. And then other things started to dawn on me. That not only would it help my cousins right now, or these people who were sending letters, but it could maybe that this content will never go old, that it could help their kids or their grandkids. If Isaac Newton had done YouTube videos on calculus, I wouldn't have to. Assuming he was good. We don't know. The other thing that happened, and even at this point, I said, okay, maybe it's a good supplement, it's good for motivated students, it's good for maybe homeschoolers, but I didn't think it would be something that would somehow penetrate the classroom. But then I started getting letters from teachers, and the teachers would write saying, "We've used your videos to flip the classroom. You've given the lectures. So now what we do," and this could actually happen in every classroom in America tomorrow, what I do is I assign the lectures for homework, and what used to be homework, I now have the students doing in the classroom. And I want to pause here for I want to pause here for a second because there's a couple of interesting things. One, when those teachers are doing that, there's the obvious benefit. There's the benefit that now their students can enjoy the videos in the way that my cousins did. They can pause, repeat at their own pace, at their own time. But the more interesting thing, and this is the unintuitive thing when you talk about technology in the classroom, by removing the one-size-fits-all lecture from the classroom and letting students have a self-paced lecture at home, and then when you go to the classroom, letting them do work, having the teacher walk around, having the peers actually be able to interact with each other, these teachers have used technology to humanize the classroom. They took a fundamentally dehumanizing experience, a bunch of 30 kids with their fingers on their lips, not allowed to interact with each other. A teacher, no matter how good, has to give this kind of one-size-fits-all lecture to 30 students, blank faces, slightly antagonistic, and now it's a human experience. Now they're actually interacting with each other. So once the Khan Academy kind of, I quit my job and we turned into a real organization, we're a not-for-profit, the question is, how do we take this to the next level? How do we take what those teachers were doing to their natural conclusion? And so what I'm showing over here, these are actual exercises that I started writing for my cousins. The ones I started were much more primitive. This is a kind of a more competent version of it. But the paradigm here is we'll generate as many questions as you need until you get that concept, until you get 10 in a row. And the Khan Academy videos are there. You get hints, the actual steps for that problem if you don't know how to do it. But the paradigm here, it seems like a very simple thing, 10 in a row, you move on. But it's fundamentally different than what's happening in classrooms right now. In a traditional classroom, you have a couple of homework, lecture, and then you have a snapshot exam. And that exam, whether you get a 70%, an 80%, a 90%, or a 95%, the class moves on to the next topic. And even that 95% student, what was the 5% they didn't know? Maybe they didn't know what happens when you raise something to the 0th power. And then you go build on that in the next concept. That's analogous to, imagine learning to ride a bicycle. And I give you a bicycle, maybe I give you a lecture ahead of time, and I give you that bicycle for 2 weeks, and then I come back after 2 weeks, and I say, well, let's see, you're having trouble taking left turns, you can't quite stop. You're an 80% bicyclist. So I put a big C stamp on your forehead, and then I say, here's a unicycle. But as ridiculous as that sounds, that's exactly what's happening in our classrooms right now. And the idea is, you fast forward and good students start failing algebra all of a sudden and start failing calculus all of a sudden, despite it being smart, despite having good teachers, and it's usually because they had these Swiss cheese gaps that kept building throughout their foundation. So our model is learn math the way you would learn anything, like the way you would learn a bicycle. Stay on that bicycle. Fall off that bicycle. Do it as long as necessary until you have mastery. The traditional model, it penalizes you for experimentation and failure, but it does not expect mastery. We encourage you to experiment. We encourage you to failure, but we do expect mastery. This is just another one of the modules. This is trigonometry. This is shifting and reflecting functions. And they all fit together. We have about 90 of these right now. And you could go to the site right now. It's all free, not trying to sell anything. But the general idea is that they all fit into this knowledge map. That top node right there, that's literally single-digit addition. It's like 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And the paradigm is, once you get 10 in a row on that, then it keeps forwarding you to more and more advanced modules. So if you keep this is further down the knowledge map, we're getting into more advanced arithmetic. Further down, you start getting into pre-algebra and early algebra. Further down, you start getting into algebra 1, algebra 2, a little bit of pre-calculus. And the idea is from this, we can actually teach everything. Well, everything that can be taught in this type of a framework. So you can imagine, and this is what we are working on, is from this knowledge map, you have logic, you have computer programming, you have grammar, you have genetics, all based off of that core of, okay, if you know this and that, now you're ready for this next concept. Now, that can work well for an individual learner, and I encourage for you to do it with your kids, but I also encourage everyone in the audience to do it yourself. It'll change what happens at the dinner table. But what we want to do is use the natural conclusion of the flipping of the classroom that those early teachers had emailed me about. And so what I'm showing you here, this is actually data from a pilot in the Los Altos School District where they took 2 5th-grade classes and 2 7th-grade classes and completely gutted their old math curriculum. These kids aren't using textbooks. They're not getting one-size-fits-all lectures. They're doing Khan Academy. They're doing that software for roughly half of their math class. And I want to make it clear, We don't view this as the complete math education. What it does is, and this is what's happening in Los Altos, it frees up time. This is the blocking and tackling, making sure you know how to do a system of equations, and it frees up time for the simulations, for the games, for the mechanics, for the robot building, for the estimating how high that hill is based on its shadow. And so the paradigm is the teacher walks in every day, every kid works at their own pace, and a teacher this is actually a live dashboard from Los Altos School District, and they look at this dashboard. Every row is a student. Every column is one of those concepts. Green means the student's already proficient. Blue means that they're working on it, no need to worry. Red means they're stuck. And what the teacher does is literally just says, let me intervene on the red kids. Or even better, let me get one of the green kids who are already proficient in that concept to be the first line of attack and actually tutor their peer. Now, I kind of come from a very data-centric reality, so we don't want that teacher to even go and intervene and have to ask the kid awkward questions. Oh, what do you not understand, or what do you do understand, and all of the rest. So our paradigm is to really arm the teachers with as much data as possible, really data that in almost any other field is expected if you're in finance or marketing or manufacturing, and so the teachers can actually diagnose what's wrong with the students so that they can make their interaction as productive as possible. So now the teachers know exactly what the students have been up to, how long they've been spending every day, what videos have they been watching, when did they pause the videos, what did they stop watching, what exercises are they using, what have they been focused on. The outer circle shows what the exercises they're focused on, the inner circle shows the videos they're focused on. And the data gets pretty granular, so you can actually see the exact problems that the student got right or wrong. Red is wrong, blue is right. The leftmost question is the first question that the student attempted. They watched the video right over there. And then you could see eventually they were able to get 10 in a row. It's almost like you can almost see them learning over those last 10 problems. They also got faster. The height is how long it took them. So, when you talk about self-paced learning, it makes sense for everyone. In education speak, differentiated learning. But it's kind of crazy what happens when you actually see it in a classroom. Because every time we've done this, in every classroom we've done, over and over again, if you go 5 days into it, there's a group of kids who've raced ahead, and there's a group of kids who are a little bit slower. And in a traditional model, if you did a snapshot assessment, you say, oh, these are the gifted kids, these are the slow kids. Maybe they should be tracked differently. Maybe we should put them in different classes. But when you let every student work at their own pace, and we see it over and over and over again, you see students who took a little bit extra time on one concept or the other, but once they get through that concept, they just race ahead. And so the same kids that you thought were slow 6 weeks ago, you now would think are gifted. And we're seeing it over and over and over again. And it makes you really wonder kind of how much all of the labels, maybe a lot of us have benefited from, were really just due to a coincidence of time. Now, as valuable as something like this is in a district like Los Altos, our goal is to use technology to humanize, not just in Los Altos, but kind of on a global scale, what's happening in education. And actually, that kind of brings an interesting point, is that, a lot of the effort in humanizing the classroom is focused on student-to-teacher ratios. In our mind, the relevant metric is student to valuable human time with the teacher ratio. So in a traditional model, most of the teacher's time is spent doing lectures and grading tests and whatnot. Maybe 5% of their time is actually sitting next to students and actually working with them. Now 100% of their time is. So once again, using technology, not just flipping the classroom, you're humanizing the classroom, I'd argue, by a factor of 5 or 10. And as valuable as it is in Los Altos, imagine what that does to the adult learner who's embarrassed to go back and learn stuff that they should have known before going back to college. Imagine what it does to a street kid in Calcutta who has to help his family during the day, and that's the reason why he or she can't go to school. Now they can spend 2 hours a day and remediate or get up to speed and not feel embarrassed about what they do or don't know. Now imagine what happens where, we talked about the peers teaching each other inside of a classroom, but this is all one system. There's no reason why you can't have that peer-to-peer tutoring beyond that one classroom. Imagine what happens if that student in Calcutta all of a sudden can tutor your son, or your son can tutor that kid in Calcutta. And I think what you'll see emerging is this notion of a global one-world classroom. And that's essentially what we're trying to build. Thank you.
3 quick questions, so we got plenty of time.
Okay.
I've seen some things you're doing in the system that have to do with motivation and feedback, energy points, merit badges. Tell me what you're thinking there.
Oh yeah, no, we have an awesome team working on it. It's not, and I have to make it clear, it's not just me anymore. I'm still doing all the videos, but we have a kind of a rock star team doing the software. Yeah, we've put a bunch of game mechanics in there where you get these badges. We're going to start having leaderboards by areas, and you get points. And it's actually been pretty interesting. Just the wording of the badging or how many points you get for doing something, we see on a system-wide basis like tens of thousands of like 5th graders or 6th graders going one direction or another depending on what badge you give them.
And the collaboration you're doing with Los Altos, how did that come about?
Yeah, no, Los Altos has been it was kind of crazy. They once again, I didn't expect it to be used in classrooms. Someone from their board came and said, oh, what would you do if you had carte blanche in a classroom? And I said, well, I would just, every student work at their own pace on something like this. We'd give a dashboard, and they said, oh, this is kind of radical. We have to think about it. And me and the rest of the team were like, oh, they're never going to want to do this. But literally the next day, they're like, can you start in 2 weeks? And so
So it's fifth grade math is where that's going on right now?
It's 2 5th grade classes and 2 7th grade classes. And I think they're doing it at the district level. And I think what they're excited about is they can now follow these kids. It's not an only in-school thing. I mean, we've even, on Christmas, we saw some of the kids were doing, and we can track everything. So they can actually track them as they go through the entire district, through the summers, as they go from one teacher to the next. You have this continuity of data that even at the district level they can see.
So some of those views we saw were for the teacher to go in and track actually what's going on with those kids. So you're getting feedback on those teacher views to see what they think they need?
Oh yeah, actually most of those were kind of specs by the teachers. We made some of those for students so they could see their data, but we have a very tight design loop with the teachers themselves, and they're literally saying, hey, this is nice, but like that focus graph, a lot of the teachers said, I have a feeling that a lot of the kids are jumping around and not focusing on one topic, so we made that focus diagram for them. So it's all been teacher driven. It's been pretty crazy.
Is this ready for prime time? Do you think a lot of classes next school year should try this thing out?
Yeah, it's ready. We got 1 million people on the site already, so we can handle a few more. And it's no reason why it really can't happen in every classroom in America tomorrow.
And the vision of the tutoring thing, the idea there is if I'm confused about a topic, somehow right in user interface, I'd find people who are volunteering, maybe see their reputation, and I could schedule and connect up with those people.
Absolutely, and this is something that I recommend everyone in this audience to do is those dashboards that teachers have, you can go log in right now and you can essentially become a coach for your kids, your nephews, your cousins, or maybe some kids at the Boys and Girls Club. And yeah, you can start becoming a mentor or tutor really immediately, but yeah, it's all there.
Well, it's amazing. I think you've just got a glimpse of the future of education. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
I'm Jane McGonigal. I'm a game designer. I've been making games online now for 10 years, and my goal for the next decade is to try to make it as easy to save the world in real life as it is to save the world in online games. Now, I have a plan for this, and it entails convincing more people, including all of you, to spend more time playing bigger and better games. Right now, we spend 3 billion hours a week playing online games. Some of you might be thinking, that's a lot of time to spend playing games, maybe too much time, considering how many urgent problems we have to solve in the real world. But actually, according to my research at the Institute for the Future, it's actually the opposite is true. 3 billion hours a week is not nearly enough gameplay to solve the world's most urgent problems. In fact, I believe that if we want to survive the next century on this planet, we need to increase that total dramatically. I've calculated the total we need at 21 billion hours of gameplay every week. So that's probably a bit of a counterintuitive idea, so I'll say it again, let it sink in. If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am. Here's why. This picture pretty much sums up why I think games are so essential to the future survival of the human species. Truly. This is a portrait by a photographer named Phil Toledano. He wanted to capture the emotion of gaming, so he set up a camera in front of gamers while they were playing. And this is a classic gaming emotion. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance in this photo. You probably see the sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration, deep, deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. If you are a gamer, you will notice a few nuances here. The crinkle of the eyes up and around the mouth is a sign of optimism. And the eyebrows up is surprise. This is a gamer who's on the verge of something called an epic win. Now, oh, you've heard of that. OK, good. So we have some gamers among us. So an epic win is an outcome that is so extraordinarily positive, you had no idea it was even possible until you achieved it. It was almost beyond the threshold of imagination. And when you get there, you are shocked to discover what you're truly capable of. That's an epic win. This is a gamer on the verge of an epic win. And this is the face that we need to see on millions of problem solvers all over the world as we try to tackle the obstacles of the next century. The face of someone who, against all odds, is on the verge of an epic win. Now, unfortunately, this is more of the face that we see in everyday life now as we try to tackle urgent problems. This is what I call the I'm not good at life face. And this is actually me making it. Can you see it? Yes, good. This is actually me making the I'm not good at life face. This is a piece of graffiti in my old neighborhood in Berkeley, California, where I did my PhD on why we're better in games than we are in real life. And this is a problem that a lot of gamers have. We feel that we are not as good in reality as we are in games. And I don't mean just good as in successful, although that's part of it. We do achieve more in game worlds. But I also mean good as in motivated to do something that matters, inspired to collaborate and to cooperate. When we're in game worlds, I believe that many of us become the best version of ourselves, the most likely to help at a moment's notice, the most likely to stick with a problem as long as it takes, to get up after failure and try again. And in real life, when we face failure, when we confront obstacles, we often don't feel that way. We feel overcome. We feel overwhelmed. We feel anxious, maybe depressed, frustrated, or cynical. We never have those feelings when we're playing games. They just don't exist in games. So that's what I wanted to study when I was a graduate student. What about games makes it impossible to feel that we can't achieve everything? How can we take those feelings from games and apply them to real-world work? So I looked at games like World of Warcraft, which is really the ideal collaborative problem-solving environment. And I started to notice a few things that make epic wins so possible in online worlds. So the first thing is, whenever you show up in one of these online games, especially in World of Warcraft, there are lots and lots of different characters who are willing to trust you with a world-saving mission right away. But not just any mission. It's a mission that is perfectly matched with your current level in the game, right? So you can do it. They never give you a challenge that you can't achieve. But it is on the verge of what you're capable of, so you have to try hard. But there's no unemployment in World of Warcraft. There's no sitting around wringing your hands. There's always something specific and important to be done. And there are also tons of collaborators everywhere you go. Hundreds of thousands of people ready to work with you to achieve your epic mission. That's not something we have in real life that easily. The sense that at our fingertips are tons of collaborators. And also there's this epic story, this inspiring story of why we're there and what we're doing. And then we get all this positive feedback. You guys have heard of leveling up and +1 strength and +1 intelligence. We don't get that kind of constant feedback in real life. When I get off the stage, I'm not going to have +1 speaking and +1 crazy idea, +20 crazy idea. I don't get that feedback in real life. Now, the problem with collaborative online environments like World of Warcraft is that it's so satisfying to be on the verge of an epic win all the time that we decide to spend all our time in these game worlds. It's just better than reality. So far, collectively, all the World of Warcraft gamers have spent 5.93 million years solving the virtual problems of Azeroth. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It might sound like it's a bad thing. But to put that in context, 5.93 million years ago was when our earliest primate human ancestors stood up. That was the first upright primate. Okay, so when we talk about how much time we're currently investing in playing games, the only way it makes sense to even think about it is to talk about time at the magnitude of human evolution, which is an extraordinary thing, but it's also apt because it turns out that by spending all this time playing games, we're actually changing what we are capable of as human beings. We're evolving to be a more collaborative and hardy species. This is true, I believe this. So consider this really interesting statistic. It was recently published by a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University. The average young person today in a country with a strong gamer culture will have spent 10,000 hours playing online games by the age of 21. Now, 10,000 hours is a really interesting number for two reasons. First of all, for children in the United States, 10,080 hours is the exact amount of time you will spend in school from 5th grade to high school graduation if you have perfect attendance. So we have an entire parallel track of education going on where young people are learning as much about what it takes to be a good gamer as they're learning about everything else in school. Now, some of you have probably read Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Outliers. So you would have heard of his theory of success, the 10,000-hour theory of success. It's based on this great cognitive science research that if we can master 10,000 hours of effortful study at anything by the age of 21, we will be virtuosos at it. We will be as good at whatever we do as the greatest people in the world. And so now what we're looking at is an entire generation of young people who are virtuoso gamers. So the big question is, what exactly are gamers getting so good at? Because if we could figure that out, we would have a virtually unprecedented human resource on our hands. This is how many people we now have in the world who spend at least an hour a day playing online games. These are our virtuoso gamers. 500 million people who are extraordinarily good at something. And in the next decade, we're going to have another billion gamers who are extraordinarily good at whatever that is. If you don't know it already, this is coming. The game industry is developing consoles that are low energy and that work with the wireless phone networks instead of broadband internet so that gamers all over the world, particularly in India, China, Brazil, can get online. They expect 1 billion more gamers in the next decade. So it'll bring us up to 1.5 billion gamers. So I've started to think about what these games are making us virtuosos at. Here are the 4 things I came up with. The first is urgent optimism. Okay, think of this as extreme self-motivation. Urgent optimism is the desire to act immediately to tackle an obstacle, combined with the belief that we have a reasonable hope of success. Gamers always believe that an epic win is possible and that it's always worth trying, and trying now. Gamers don't sit around. Okay, gamers are virtuosos at weaving a tight social fabric. There's a lot of interesting research that shows that we like people better after we play a game with them, even if they've beaten us badly. And the reason is it takes a lot of trust to play a game with someone. We trust that they will spend their time with us, that they will play by the same rules, value the same goal, they'll stay with the game until it's over. And so playing a game together actually builds up bonds and trust and cooperation, and we actually build stronger social relationships as a result. Blissful productivity, I love it. You know, there's a reason why the average World of Warcraft gamer plays for 22 hours a week, kind of a half-time job. It's because we know when we're playing a game that we're actually happier working hard than we are relaxing or hanging out. We know that we are optimized as human beings to do hard and meaningful work. And gamers are willing to work hard all the time if they're given the right work. Finally, epic meaning. Gamers love to be attached to awe-inspiring missions, to human, planetary scale stories. So just one bit of trivia that helps put that into perspective. So you all know Wikipedia, biggest wiki in the world. Second biggest wiki in the world, with nearly 80,000 articles, is the World of Warcraft wiki. 5 million people use it every month. They have compiled more information about World of Warcraft on the internet than any other topic covered on any other wiki in the world. They are building an epic story. They are building an epic knowledge resource about the World of Warcraft. Okay, so these are 4 superpowers that add up to one thing. Gamers are super empowered, hopeful individuals. These are people who believe that they are individually capable of changing the world. And the only problem is they believe that they are capable of changing virtual worlds and not the real world. That's the problem that I'm trying to solve. There's an economist named Edward Castronova whose work is brilliant. He looks at why people are investing so much time and energy and money in online worlds. And he says we're witnessing what amounts to no less than a mass exodus to virtual worlds and online game environments. And he's an economist, so he's rational. And he says, not like me, I'm a game designer, I'm exuberant. But he says that this makes perfect sense. Because gamers can achieve more in online worlds than they can in real life. They can have stronger social relationships in games than they can have in real life. They get better feedback and feel more rewarded in games than they do in real life. So he says, for now, it makes perfect sense for gamers to spend more time in virtual worlds than the real world. Now, I also agree that that is rational for now, but it is not by any means an optimal situation. We have to start making the real world work more like a game. So I take my inspiration from something that happened 2,500 years ago. These are ancient dice made out of sheep's knuckles, right? Before we had awesome game controllers, we had sheep's knuckles. And these represent the first game equipment designed by human beings. And if you're familiar with the work of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, you might know this history, which is the history of who invented games and why. Herodotus says that games, particularly dice games, were invented in the kingdom of Lydia during a time of famine. Apparently, there was such a severe famine that the king of Lydia decided they had to do something crazy. People were suffering, people were fighting. It was an extreme situation. They needed an extreme solution. So, according to Herodotus, they invented dice games and they set up a kingdom-wide policy. On one day, everybody would eat. And on the next day, everybody would play games. And they would be so immersed in playing the dice games, because games are so engaging and immerse us in such satisfying, blissful productivity, they would ignore the fact that they had no food to eat. And then on the next day, they would play games. And on the next day, they would eat. And according to Herodotus, they passed 18 years this way, surviving through a famine by eating on one day and playing games on the next. Now, this is exactly, I think, how we're using games today. We're using games to escape real-world suffering. We're using games to get away from everything that's broken in the real environment, everything that's not satisfying about real life, and we're getting what we need from games. But it doesn't have to end there. This is really exciting. According to Herodotus, after 18 years, the famine wasn't getting better, so the king decided they would play one final dice game. They divided the entire kingdom in half. They played one dice game. And the winners of that game got to go on an epic adventure. They would leave Lydia, and they would go out in search of a new place to live, leaving behind just enough people to survive on the resources that were available, and hopefully to take their civilization somewhere else where they could thrive. Now, this sounds crazy, right? But recently, DNA evidence has shown that the Etruscans, who then led to the Roman Empire, actually share the same DNA as the ancient Lydians. And so, recently, scientists have suggested that Herodotus' crazy story is actually true. And geologists have found evidence of a global cooling that lasted for nearly 20 years that could have explained the famine. So this crazy story might be true. They might have actually saved their culture by playing games, escaping to games for 18 years, and then been so inspired and knew so much about how to come together with games that they actually saved the entire civilization that way. Okay, we can do that. We've been playing Warcraft since 1994. That was the first real-time strategy game from the World of Warcraft series. That was 16 years ago. They played dice games for 18 years. We've been playing Warcraft for 16 years. I say we are ready for our own epic game. Now, they had half the civilization go off in search of a new world. So that's where I get my 21 billion hours a week of gameplay from. Let's get half of us to agree to spend an hour a day playing games until we solve real-world problems. Now, I know you're asking, How are we going to solve real-world problems in games? Well, that's what I have devoted my work to over the past few years at the Institute for the Future. We have this banner in our offices in Palo Alto, and it expresses our view of how we should try to relate to the future. We do not want to try to predict the future. What we want to do is make the future. We want to imagine the best-case scenario outcome, and then we want to empower people to make that outcome a reality. We want to imagine epic wins, and then give people the means to achieve the epic win. I'm just going to very briefly show you 3 games that I've made that are an attempt to give people the means to create epic wins in their own futures. So this is World Without Oil. We made this game in 2007. This is an online game in which you try to survive an oil shortage. The oil shortage is fictional, but we put enough online content out there for you to believe that it's real and to live your real life as if we've run out of oil. So when you come to the game, you sign up, you tell us where you live, and then we give you real-time news videos, data feeds that show you exactly how much oil costs, what's not available, how food supply is being affected, how transportation is being affected, if schools are closed, if there's rioting. And you have to figure out how you would live your real life as if this were true. And then we ask you to blog about it, to post videos, to post photos. We piloted this game with 1,700 players in 2007, and we've tracked them for the 3 years since. And I can tell you that this is a transformative experience. Nobody wants to change how they live just because it's good for the world or because we're supposed to. But if you immerse them in an epic adventure and tell them, we've run out of oil, this is an amazing story and adventure for you to go on. Challenge yourself to see how you would survive. Most of our players have kept up the habits that they learned in this game. So for the next world-saving game, we decided to aim higher, bigger problem than just peak oil. We did a game called Superstruct at the Institute for the Future. And the premise was a supercomputer has calculated that humans have only 23 years left on the planet. The supercomputer was called the Global Extinction Awareness System, of course. And we asked people to come online, almost like a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. You know Jerry Bruckheimer movies? You form a dream team. You've got the astronaut, the scientist, the ex-convict, and they all have something to do to save the world. But in our game, instead of just having 5 people on the dream team, we said everybody's on the dream team, and it's your job to invent the future of energy, the future of food, the future of health, the future of security, and the future of the social safety net. We had 8,000 people play that game for 8 weeks. They came up with 500 insanely creative solutions that you can go online if you Google Superstruct and see. So finally, the last game, we're launching it March 3rd. This is a game done with the World Bank Institute. If you complete the game, you will be certified by the World Bank Institute as a social innovator, class of 2010, working with universities all over sub-Saharan Africa, and we are inviting them to learn social innovation skills. We've got a graphic novel, we've got leveling up in skills like local insight, knowledge networking, sustainability, vision, and resourcefulness. I would like to invite all of you to please share this game with young people anywhere in the world, particularly in developing areas, who might benefit from coming together to try to start to imagine their own social enterprises to save the world. So I'm going to wrap up now. I want to ask a question. What do you think happens next? We've got all these amazing gamers. We've got these games that are kind of pilots of what we might do, but none of them have saved the real world yet. Well, I hope that you will agree with me that gamers are a human resource that we can use to do real-world work, that games are a powerful platform for change. We have all these amazing superpowers, blissful productivity, the ability to weave a tight social fabric, this feeling of urgent optimism and the desire for epic meaning. I really hope that we can come together to play games that matter, to survive on this planet for another century. And that's my hope, that you will join me in making and playing games like this. When I look forward to the next decade, I know 2 things for sure: that we can make any future we can imagine, and we can play any games we want. So I say, let the world-changing games begin. Thank you. Thank you.